Hi. Would you like to know some tips to increase your chance of winning your asylum case? Tonight, I'm going to talk about just that. We're going to discuss tips to increase your chance of winning asylum, and specifically, we're going to talk about evidence gathering and evidence review. I'm Lindsey. I'm an attorney with a light legal immigration law firm in Washington, D.C. We represent clients in immigration cases all over the country and all over the world, depending on the type of assistance they need. And each Tuesday, we bring information to you. Sometimes they are short videos, other times they're a little longer. We just want to bring education, information, and updates to help our clients and our friends stay up to date on what's going on in the immigration world. So tonight, we're specifically going to talk about evidence gathering and review as a way to increase your chances of having your asylum case approved. And this applies to whether you are filing for asylum before the immigration court or before the asylum office. So there are many factors that go into the equation of winning an asylum case, and the evidence is one part of it. And there's two reasons why evidence gathering and review is so important to your asylum case. So the first reason why evidence gathering and review is important to your asylum case is because asylum law says that you have to try to corroborate all of your story unless the evidence is not reasonably necessary. Also, consistency and credibility are extremely important to every single asylum case. And the fastest way to ruin your credibility, or also believability is the same thing as credibility, is to submit inconsistent evidence or give testimony that is inconsistent with your evidence. So we want tonight to go through 5 steps to evidence collection and review so that you make your case stronger and that you increase those chances for winning your case. I've boiled this down to 5 steps to help explain the process that we go through and the steps that we think are important to evidence gathering and review. First, I'm going to go through these quickly, and then we'll go through them in more detail. So 5 steps to evidence collection and review include working with a good attorney who cares about your case. Number 2, have a timeline for your case. Number 3, try to obtain evidence that supports each part of your story. Number 4 is review, and review again. And number 5 is never use evidence that you do not know how it was obtained or that you are not certain is genuine. So let's start from the beginning. The first suggestion that I have for increasing your chance of winning asylum in the evidence and review stage includes working with an attorney, with a good attorney who cares about you and who cares about your case. Every single case is unique, and every attorney should be giving you instructions on how to best prepare yourself and how to best prepare your case. And that should be based on individualized advice, based on what you have experienced, based on what you've told your attorney. And it's also very important for your attorney to be able to give you evidence suggestions and evidence reviews, that you tell your attorney everything that's happened to you. Tell your attorney all of the details, the good details, the bad details, details of things that happened when you were young that maybe you don't believe or know would have any impact on your case, but they could actually be important. Also, tell your attorney about short detentions that you don't think are important because maybe you weren't harmed during those detentions. Talk about any threats, any harassment. Your attorney is the one who needs to decide what is the most important evidence to provide for your case, and they can also help craft your story along with the evidence that is being provided. Of course, I know that everyone does not have the luxury of having an attorney. Having an attorney is truly a luxury. In our immigration world, immigration cases, applicants are not guaranteed an attorney, and attorneys often cost money. Sometimes people are lucky and they get pro bono attorneys. So even if you do not have an attorney, the remaining steps are still going to be very important for you. I also know that not all attorneys work on cases in the same way. Maybe you have an attorney and it's still important for you to advocate for yourself and make sure that your case is being prepared as fully and consistently as possible. So whether you have an attorney or not, the next steps apply equally to you, and these will help strengthen your case and chance of winning asylum, whether or not you have an attorney. So let's move on to number 2. Make a timeline for your case. This is a really important step to preparing your case, and it's important before you start gathering your evidence because it's going to help you know what evidence you need for your case. On this timeline, you need to put all important dates, everything that's happened to you from the beginning to present day. I even want you to put the date that you were born on this timeline. Do you know when you were born? Probably so. Is it something you're going to forget? Probably not. Do I want it on your timeline? Absolutely. Also want dates for things like when you attended school, when you stopped school, started and stopped jobs, when your kids were born, what date of marriage, date of deaths that are important to your story. And also all the important details about the harm and threats and fear of harm that you've experienced. Putting all of these dates on the timeline is important for multiple reasons. And first of all, it helps you put your story in a chronological order. And it's also going to be your document that you go back to while you're collecting evidence and while you're reviewing evidence to make sure your case is consistent, to make sure that you haven't made a mistake in the date somewhere that will actually cause you to lose your case. And this document will be important also even when you're preparing for your interview. It helps you keep a frame of reference of what happened and when. And there may even be some parts of your story that you don't have a date for. In fact, it's more likely than not that you don't have dates for everything. But maybe you know, in general, this event happened before the election of 2010. Put the election of 2010 on your timeline, and then you can fill in the things that happened before and after. So these are just some suggestions for creating this timeline that's going to be an important part of gathering your evidence and reviewing your evidence. So also, once this timeline is created, then look at it and think about what are the important events that you need to corroborate in some way. Who are the people involved? When you look at those dates, when you look at those events on your timeline, who may be able to help you gather the evidence that you need, or who may be able to write statements? Who was around? Who did you tell? All of these questions should be going through your mind while you're looking at your timeline. And also, who may be able to help? Maybe they're writing statements. Maybe they can help you gather documents. Think of all these things once you have your timeline drafted out and you start moving on to the next step. So you're going to use this timeline going forward for every part of your case preparation, evidence review, and interview prep. So it's a very important part of this process. And I want you to do that before you move on to the next suggestions for increasing your chance of winning asylum. The next step, number 3 of 5, now it's time for you to try to obtain evidence that supports each part of your story, each part of your experience. Asylum law says that you have to corroborate all of your story. You have to corroborate everything that's happened to you unless the evidence is not reasonably available. So we know that there is going to be evidence that is not available. Evidence that maybe never existed, maybe evidence that was destroyed, maybe evidence that was lost. There are a lot of reasons why evidence may not exist to corroborate your case, but that doesn't mean that you are allowed to not try to obtain it or document why you can't obtain it or what's happened to it. Now, in corroborating evidence, or thinking about evidence that corroborates your case. There's a lot of different types of evidence that may corroborate your case. I'm going to list several because you should be thinking about all of these when you're trying to figure out what evidence do I have to help corroborate my case, to help show the asylum officer that I was in this place at this time, or this thing happened to me, or I was involved in this group. There's lots of different things that may help. So think about different types of evidence: photographs, medical records, police records, complaints. Maybe you filed a complaint at work because you were being discriminated against, for example. Maybe you have an email trail of different things that happened, put you at a certain place at a certain time, or shows that you were inquiring about something that's important to your case. Maybe you were organizing something that was important to your case through emails. Also, employment or school records. Employment and school records can be important to show that you were a student at a certain university when a specific event occurred. Although you say you were a student at this time and you were involved in student protest, that doesn't necessarily prove your story. And you may have been detained and you may not have a police record, but perhaps you have something that at least shows you were a first-year student at the university during this time. So think about things like employment records or school records as ways to corroborate your story. Also, other types of evidence to think about: was there newspaper coverage or media coverage of different events that are important to your story? You need to obtain things like marriage certificates, birth certificates, death records, also supporting affidavits. Maybe medical records don't exist or police records don't exist, but perhaps there is a witness who can write an affidavit for you, and that affidavit may be given just as much weight as a police report or a medical report would have been given. The list goes on and on. It really depends on what happened to you as to what evidence may be available or what evidence you should be thinking about. But as you're thinking of evidence and trying to obtain evidence, there's a few things that you need to do. It's important to document your efforts. So what are you asking for? What have you thought about? What have you asked for or looked for? What were you able to obtain? And how did you get it? Document this. Keep the envelope. Keep the email. Be able to show the judge or show the asylum officer how you were actually able to get the supporting affidavit or how you got the medical record that you requested. Also, it's as important to document what you were not able to get and why not. So, for example, let's say that you reached out to your employer to ask for a statement to confirm that you were out of work for the month of July 2011 because you were out of work in July 2011 because you were detained. And even though your boss may not be able to say the person was detained during July 2011, maybe they can at least corroborate that you were not at work for all of July 2011. But maybe your boss refuses, or someone says, oh, we don't have those records anymore. Then document that. You can basically have a diary or a journal entry of all the evidence you've tried to get. You can take notes for yourself so that you know 2 years from now, 3 years from now, what you tried to get and why you weren't able to get it. And if you have evidence of why you were not able to get it, then save that as well, because that can be very helpful. Because remember, asylum law requires that you corroborate every piece of your story unless that evidence is not reasonably obtainable. And if a judge says to you, Lindsey, you say that you had to have surgery on your ankle because of an injury that happened during detention on this date, why don't you have any medical documentation of this? Then I need to either be able to say, well, here's my medical documentation, or I have to be able to explain to the judge why I don't have that medical documentation. Because if I can't explain why I don't have it and it should be available, then the judge can deny my case because I didn't try to obtain it and I haven't given any reasonable explanation for why I don't have it. So if the hospital burned down, if the medical facilities in your country just don't keep records like we're accustomed to in the US, there may be many reasons why you don't have a document, but please keep a journal, keep a diary of what you tried to obtain and what you weren't able to get. Okay, so let's move on to the next stage of of evidence collection and evidence review. The next step is super important. You have to review, and you have to review again and again. And this is where your timeline that we talked about in step 2 becomes very important. Okay, you are the first round of review for all of your documents, for all of your evidence, whether you have an attorney who you're going to send this on to, or whether you're representing yourself. This step is very important. You must review everything before you send it to your attorney or before you give it to the asylum office or to an immigration judge. You need to go through every single document that you've collected and compare it to your timeline. Even your birth certificate. How many of you have actually read every single word on your birth certificate and made sure that your name is spelled correctly and your parents' names and that your date of birth was correct? We often find mistakes that clients never knew existed on their documents because we don't really look that closely at our own documents. We just assume they're correct. So it's important to review everything. Review the birth certificate. Review your passport. Review every single stamp on your passport. Review every single trip that you've made and compare every single thing back to your timeline. Does your passport show that in October of 2012, you were in Egypt for a work trip when you actually thought your detention was in October of 2012? Well, guess what? Now that date on your passport may help you figure out that this whole time you thought a detention was in 2012, but it was actually 2013. So that's why it's very important to go through every page and every detail of every document to make sure that everything is consistent and to make sure that you are not causing problems for your case that could easily be avoided. Other types of documents, of course, death certificates, school certificates, look at your dates of graduation, your dates of attendance, compare it back to your timeline. Everything's important. All dates are important. Everything that is spelled incorrectly or correctly is important. Sequence of events is important. It's all important. So we often find mistakes or inconsistencies that would shatter a case if we had not caught those issues before filing. However, we caught it and it was easy to deal with, easy to figure out where things went wrong and what needed to be fixed before we made a fatal decision in a case that could have led to something being denied. Now, your attorney should also review. Again, remember, whether you have an attorney or whether you don't, these steps are important. And if you are working with an attorney and you're sending all of your evidence to your attorney, I still want you to review everything before you send it to your attorney, because 2 sets of eyes is better than 1. You're the first round of review, and then your attorney should be the second round of review. Part of the attorney's job is to create the record, to submit the evidence that establishes their client's eligibility for asylum. So your attorney should be reviewing every single document. They shouldn't just accept your birth certificate without looking at it at all of the details. They should be giving you feedback on every single document that illustrates to you that they've reviewed it and that it's either good to go or that it needs improvement, or perhaps maybe it's just not helpful and not even something that can be used for the case. But either way, you should be working with an attorney who is reviewing your case very carefully, just as we've described. Not all attorneys are the same. Everyone makes mistakes. So that's why it's important for you to be the first line of review for your evidence, okay? All right, so now we're moving to the last tip. Never, ever, ever use fraudulent evidence or evidence that you are not sure about its authenticity. Do not ruin your case. Do not ruin your life because you feel like something has to be provided that you don't have. Just because you do not have corroborating evidence for everything in your case does not mean you will not win your case. Most people don't have corroborating evidence for everything in their case. It's actually quite rare. But if you go through these steps of thinking about what you could obtain and documenting why you can't get it, then that's going to be far more important and far more helpful than trying to get a fake doctor's report or a fake police report, or asking someone to obtain it for you and not confirming that they actually got it from the place they say they did. It's so important to confirm the authenticity and to never, ever, ever submit anything that is fraudulent. So I can't stress this point enough. Even if you have absolutely nothing else to support your case, even if you have absolutely no other documents to show that what you say happened to you, your testimony may be enough. It's important to always be consistent, to always be credible, and going through these steps to obtain evidence is important. But do not ruin your case and do not ruin your life or your family's chances of being reunited by trying to get a fake document just because you think it's necessary. Okay, so these are my 5 tips on increasing your chance of winning asylum through evidence gathering and review. So one more time, I'm going to run through these 5, and then you guys are welcome to drop comments or questions. Remember, this is a public forum, so everything will be public. You can send us information privately. But for tips to winning your asylum case, evidence gathering and review, 5 quick tips. Work with a good attorney who cares about you and cares about your case. Have a timeline for your case. Try to obtain evidence that supports all of your story. Review, and review again. And never use evidence that is not authentic or is not genuine. Okay, I'm going to take a look. Tigist, hello. Thank you for hello. Hello, it's very nice to see you here. We're always happy to have people join us for these Facebook Lives. We also stream to YouTube. We hope that these are helpful. We want everyone to have a successful immigration case. It is very important to stay on top of things, to stay educated about what's happening in our immigration system, and also to work very hard to prepare your case and be consistent and credible. If anyone has any questions, again, please feel free to drop those in the comments. You can also email us. You can call us. We have 24-hour answering service. You can call and leave a message anytime. Our attorneys will get back to you. You can also email us, and we'll be happy to schedule you for a consultation. And of course, you can also send us a private message on Facebook as well. So that wraps up our show tonight and tips on increasing your chances of winning asylum, evidence gathering, and evidence review. This is very important for all asylum cases. Again, whether you are represented or not, you can increase your chances of winning your case by following these steps. And I'm going to check the comments one more time. I don't see any live questions for now. So I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. I hope this information is helpful, and best of luck to you in your asylum case.